welcome to Shad Life. The other day I saw that Brant Moore, cool YouTuber, I'll put a link to his channel in the comments. He actually, one of his local spots is Ray's indoor mountain bike park, so I think that's pretty cool. Didn't see him when I was there, but I know about him and he does some cool stuff. So anyway, back to this interview. He interviewed the team over at Huffy. Now, Huffy is deciding to get back into BMX again. So, since I saw that interview, I watched the whole thing. I just want to give my 2 cents and a little bit of history because I've been around a while and I've watched this play out time and time again. So, let's get into it. Okay, so Huffy, yes, most people know who they are. They are like a extremely low-end department store brand, and in my opinion, most of those bikes fall into the category of junk. I know people criticize me for that. They're like, well, not everybody can afford, right? And it's like, I get it. Not everybody can afford, more expensive bikes. But I'm of the opinion that if you're going to offer, and this goes for all products, not just bicycles, but I'm going to talk about bicycles, but if anyone's going to offer a product that says it's going to do a certain thing, it should at least do a decent enough basic job at that thing and be reliable, dependable, last a long time, and so on. What's happened is these bikes are so poorly made, they're poorly assembled because department store doesn't have bike shop qualified mechanics, and they're just poorly made to where they do not last very long, and they have problems generally right within the first few weeks of ownership. People already are having problems with them. That to me is a poor experience for the person who buys the bike, and most of the people buying these bikes in the department stores don't know this. They're not, like me or any of us that are in tune to what a bicycle should be. They think that that's perfectly normal. It's a normal bicycle, so they buy a bicycle at a department store. They get out and start riding it. It has all these problems. It's heavy. It doesn't ride very good. It's not efficient. All these things. And if they end up just setting the bike aside and not riding it very much, or it has mechanical problems, and they go to a bike shop, and a bike shop wants to charge them $50, $70, $80 to fix the problem. It's like, well, geez, that's what they paid for the bike, or almost, right? And so I call them landfill bikes, disposable bikes. I don't like it that we have this big part of the bicycle industry of making this stuff that just doesn't last and isn't reliable and gives people a poor experience. That's why I criticize them. I understand that not everybody can afford expensive bikes, but I feel like there could be a more concerted effort of kind of starting with a baseline, and I wish that like the consumer products, CPSC, Consumer Product Safety Commission would get involved and say, hey, your bike has to at least meet these requirements. And I know people don't like the government getting involved, whatever, but I feel like it's not safe. It creates more landfill, environmental issues, things like that. So now that I got that off my chest, let's talk about Huffy getting back into BMX, right? And I come at it with kind of a negative feeling for a reason. We'll go and talk about the history of Huffy and having gotten back into BMX in the past. But it's not that I disagree with them getting into BMX. I just don't think they're going to stick with it for very long. I think it's a temporary thing because they have bean counters, and if they're not making the profits for their shareholders and the money they're investing into this BMX thing isn't giving them the kickbacks that they want for their shareholders, they're not going to stick with it. And so this is where history comes in. So let's talk about Huffy in the past. This is why I like BMXmuseum.com. If you ever want to see basically the entire history of BMX, BMXmuseum.com is the place to go. I will put a link in the description for that also. This right here that I have pictured is essentially what I saw when I was growing up. Like, this was a cool bike, actually. Granted, it wasn't very high quality, things like that, but at the time, the difference between the BMX bikes and the higher quality bikes and this bike, there wasn't such a huge disparity. I personally had a Schwinn Stingray during this time, but it had the high-rise bars on it, right? The what did we call them? Monkey bars or whatever, or ape hangers. That's what we call them, ape hanger bars. And we had, the banana seat, and then again, probably these terms are probably not politically correct anymore. We called it the sissy bar. Don't know why. I guess the reason why is because if you had to hold on to it, you were a sissy. Whatever. Anyway, moving on. When I saw these, even though I had a Schwinn Stingray, which was a much better quality bike, I just thought this bike was cool. It had the number plate, had the fenders, had the MX seat, things like that. And I actually saw a lot of kids take the MX seat off and the sissy bar off and put like a regular, we used to call them 10-speed seats on here and ride them like that without this seat, because that's what most BMX bikes were, right? But it had wide, flat motocross style bars, because that's what they were trying to do here, is mimic motocross. So these were really cool, and quality was so-so, but it was like something that got kids excited, right? So let's move on into the early 80s here. So this was kind of the early 80s. Again, fairly low quality. This is a Pro Thunder, but these bikes were what I saw a lot of kids riding, and they were getting excited. And one of the big advantages of this bike or upgrade is, if you see where my little thing, let's see if we can actually zoom into it right here, you can tell it has a double clamp stem, which made a big difference over the single clamp stem, because you could actually hold the handlebars. And that was kind of one of the failure points of bikes back then. And it actually went with a tubular fork. Granted, this was all steel and so on, but this bike was viable for a lot of kids to get into the sport. I'm going to search for the next level, and when Huffy decided to get serious about BMX with the Pro Lightning. Let me see if I can find one here on BMX Museum. Then Huffy came out with a bike called the Pro Lightning, and they made a few different models of these, and one of them actually was a full chromoly frame and fork. I don't know if this particular model is that. One thing they did is they had all this teardrop tubing, similar to a Skyway TA, but I don't even think the Skyway TAs were out at this time, or they came around the same time. But what was interesting about these bikes is the seat post was even that arrow shape, to slide into the arrow shape. So you had to have this post to go with this bike. Again, the double clamp stem. This was at the beginning of making legitimate BMX bikes. Like, at the time that these came out, you could take this to the racetrack, you could upgrade it. It actually looks like, I don't think these were the arrays that came on these. I think they came with these kind of arrow arrays. It did come with aluminum rims, but you can see you could upgrade things. You could put better cranks on it, things like that. Probably a better stem at the time, maybe a Pro Neck or something like that. Better handlebars, Redline V bars or something, or GT bars, whatever, right? Like, this bike was legit. And the chromoly one, of course, you could upgrade it to, a top of the line bike if you wanted to. So this was when Huffy was taking BMX seriously, and it was interesting because Team Murray was doing the same thing at the same time, taking BMX more seriously, and they came out with a chromoly bike called the X20R, I want to say, but Huffy didn't stick with it for very long. They were only into it at this level for a couple of years, and then they did this major shift, which was really disappointing. So Huffy decided that they were going to go the marketing route and go back to making absolute garbage. And this was the bike that they chose to pursue BMX with. This is the Stu Thompson model Huffy. So by the mid 80s, they had Stu Thompson got sponsored by Huffy. He used to ride for Redline. But if you look at this bike, it looks very much like a Redline as far as colors go and kind of the scheme they have going here, right? But super low end. I remember the stem on this bike was super crappy, and the handlebars would slide. Everything was just mild steel. The cranks were super crappy and would bend. Seat posts would bend. The kids that had these, they went back to steel rims. I mean, this bike was absolute garbage. I know the kids that owned them, they fell apart right away. They had problems with them. There was bad news. And so instead of making a pro level bike that Stu Thompson was actually racing on, what they did was Stu Thompson kept racing on his Redline, and he just put Huffy stickers on it, and it looked very close to like what this bike looks like, but he was actually racing on a Redline and just had Huffy stickers on it. So that was like kind of what was disappointing, is Huffy wasn't committed to making better quality BMX bikes. And of course, racing was kind of starting to lose its steam during this time and so on. But freestyle was big, but Huffy didn't pursue making legit freestyle bikes or anything like that, or even continue pursuing racing through the downturn, right? They just abandoned it, went with this purely profit motivation, name motivation with the Stu Thompson name on it, and so on and so forth. There doesn't seem to be a lot of information out there about these, but this was like late 90s, early 2000s. Huffy decided they were going to do BMX freestyle bikes. They also did some race bikes, aluminum frames, so on. So they seemed, once again, committed to BMX. Oh, they're going to get BMX. They hired, I know they sponsored Ruben Alcantara. I don't remember all the other details. But once again, they did this. They started making more legit freestyle bikes and race bikes. And it didn't last long. Again, I'm sure the bean counters were like, well, they're not making the money on their investment and so on. I know they made a better bike than this one that had the 990 mounts and some actual legitimate a headset or threadless stem and such. I can't seem to find one. I don't remember the name of it. If I remembered the model, I'd be able to find it. But they did make some nicer full chromoly legitimate freestyle bikes, and I know Ruben was riding one. He actually came here to Minneapolis one year and was riding on a Huffy and just doing some pretty gnarly stuff. I mean, it was a legit bike. So yeah, it didn't last long. Again, they abandoned their BMX efforts again. So here we are, roughly 20-ish years later, and here we go. Huffy's doing it again. Watched the Brant Moore episode where he was interviewing the people that work at Huffy. They seem really excited. They seem legit, like they want to do something legit here. All fine and dandy. And I don't know if they're going to come out with more bikes than what they have here, but just the few they have here, at least on the top, are decent, legit entry-level bikes. Like this one here, when I look at it, is not terrible. Like it's and the guy actually mentioned this. I don't remember the name of the people, but he actually mentioned geometry. He mentioned things like that that would help make this bike ride better. I'm sure it's just a hopefully high 10 steel frame and fork. Looks pretty legit, integrated headset, aluminum stem, decent looking stem. I mean, this looks like a legit, BMX bike entry level. Notice it has a kickstand. Why? It does look like the gearing's a little weird. Like, that doesn't look like a 9-tooth rear hub. Here we go. Maybe, or they went with a little bit bigger front chainring or sprocket, so at least the gearing should be okay. Either way, it looks legit. It has pegs. I think this is a bike that a kid could actually buy and get into freestyle. It'd be enough of a quality bike that could get them into the sport, right? That's what's the exciting part about all of this, is if Huffy is actually committed to doing this, that's pretty cool. And then if we go over here and look at their race bikes, there's these two which have aluminum frames, and I was noticing this one's a little bit more expensive. I don't know what's going to be the difference between $229 and $249, because that's only a $20 difference. But this looks like a pretty legit bike too, and what's cool about this bike is it actually looks like something you could upgrade. The cranks, they're not very good. You've got this kind of older style seat post and seat guts or whatever, but it saves money on a decent frame, and so you could upgrade the cranks. You could put a pivotal seat and seat post on here, save some weight, and so on. And if the handlebars are just steel, you could always upgrade the handlebars. As long as they last and hold up, that's fine. So this is legit. Like, if a kid wants to get into racing or even just jumping a bike or whatever, this bike will do it. They could go to the track, they could race it, and they could see if they like the sport for, $250. That is what it will help get people into the sport and fall in love with it, and then they're willing to spend more money, right? So I actually like what they're doing here. Where I kind of am critical, and only because of history, is that Huffy is a larger company. So a couple of things that I notice here is I notice all these other brands right up here. Niner even, which is a legit mountain bike brand. So Huffy is now owned by some parent conglomerate, and almost always, I don't know what the company is, I probably could research it, but they're almost always investment firms. They have a whole bunch of investors and they want to make money, and they got all these brands and they're trying to, make profits. And the problem with that is the moment there's any kind of downturn in anything, they just abandon these cool projects that they decided to do. And it's like, they're not committed to the sport, in my opinion. They're committed to making money. And if we look at some other brands that have stuck to it, Haro comes to mind. Granted, Haro's changed ownership and changed hands a bit here and there, but if you follow Haro's history, they have always stuck with BMX as like making good quality bikes, making entry-level bikes, covering the gamut. They've stuck with selling them in bike shops, things like that. Then you've got brands like S&M, right? Like, S&M has stuck with BMX through the hard times and so on. Like, it doesn't matter. And they're still there because they love BMX. They are a core BMX company, right? When I think of companies like that, and then I think of like Huffy, I don't see Huffy as one of those core brands. They're, they think they're going to get into it. They don't have the success or the numbers, and then they get out of it. Well, in order for Huffy to really become a a dedicated, legitimate BMX brand, they have to stick with it for a while. Even during the tough times, even during the downturns, they got to still keep pushing, putting out bikes, putting out decent things, sponsoring riders, things like that. And the bean counters don't like to do that. They want to abandon and try to find the next flash in the pan thing that's going to make them money. And so that is, in a nutshell, what the problem is with that I see with this. I see these people getting all excited. They got these new jobs. They're going to really push this and so on and so forth. But they need some type of guarantee from the higher ups in the company or from the investors that, yeah, we're in this for the long term. You know, we're going to, you know, BMX actually, as of today, BMX is kind of struggling. It's kind of having a downturn, and Huffy's deciding to get into this. And it's like, they actually could help BMX if they actually believed in it. And I know the people that were interviewed by Brant Moore believe in what they're doing, but they aren't the ones that are the bean counters, the ones that are making the top decisions, right? They just got this cool new job to do this cool new thing. And they're doing pretty good from what I can see here. Like, I'm looking at this. And I don't know, they might be coming out with some more models. They talked a bit about staying committed. You know, they said all the right things in that interview. But I will believe it 5 years from now, 10 years from now. If I can go and see Huffy with this great line of BMX bikes, and maybe even, you know, doing these entry-level bikes and then making better quality BMX bikes, and even, you know, making bikes that are pro level, right? Like, if they do that over the long haul and gradually build that as a brand, that would be awesome. But I'm doubtful, and the reason I'm doubtful is because of history and because I understand how things work when it comes to this kind of stuff. But we will see. You know, maybe they'll prove me wrong. Hopefully. How about let's say hopefully they'll prove me wrong. In this case, I would not mind being wrong. I would actually be quite happy if I'm completely wrong here in my assessment of what's going on here. So there you have it. I appreciate your support for my channel. Please like and subscribe. Peace.